Take one anymore.
I don't know how to.
Oh, you know what? It's
All right, we're live, everybody.
Here,
Let me We'll get started. Let's go ahead and pray. Father in heaven, God, thank you for bringing us together this morning. Thank you for your word. Thank you for who you are, how sovereign you are, and how much you care for us. Father, we pray that we would know you better after this study today, that you'd be present with us, guide us, teach us, and help us to grow closer to you, Father, and to each other. In the name of Jesus Christ, Yeshua, we pray. Amen. Okay, so we're in Leviticus 25. We made it to Leviticus 25. And anybody on Zoom there, you guys feel free to jump in with questions. We've separated computers now for bandwidth issues. I don't like that. Not a tech guy, although I went to Georgia Tech. Okay, so anyways, let's jump into Leviticus 25. We have some interesting things to talk about today, things that many of you may not be aware of. And who can read for me Leviticus 25, 1 through 7?
I can, Mr. Mason. The Lord said to Moses at Mount Sinai, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I'm going to give you, the land itself, the land itself must observe the Sabbath to the Lord. For 6 years sow your fields, and for 6 years prune your vineyards and gather their crops. But in the 7th year the land is now a year of Sabbath rest, a Sabbath to the Lord. Do not sow your fields or prune your vineyards. Do not reap what grows of itself or harvest the grapes of your untended vines. The land is to have a year of rest. Whatever the land yields during the Sabbath year will be food for you, for yourself, your male and female servants, and the hired worker and temporary resident who live among you, as well for your livestock and the wild animals in your land. Whatever the land produces may be eaten."
Very good, thank you. All right. Okay, so the Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come to the land which I give you, then the land shall keep a Sabbath to the Lord. So 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard, gather its fruit. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest for the land, a Sabbath to the Lord. You shall neither sow your field nor prune your vineyard." So what does that mean? What are we talking about?
Is this 6 years sowing, then 6 years pruning? Total of 12?
No.
Okay, just making
So
sure.
field and vineyards are just different types of
Areas.
income businesses.
Okay.
So we don't think of agriculture as business, but they did. So, people in cities buy food from farmers. So the field or the vineyard is the business. Like my coffee shop is, for me, a business that produces income. So does a farmer's field. I mean, farmer has 60 acres. He doesn't need 60 acres to feed his family, right? You only need an acre or less to feed your family. Okay, if you did all normal vegetables, etc. So why do farmers have such big swaths of land? Because they want to sell. They grow what they need, and then they sell extra for money so they can buy clothes and oxes and whatever else they need. Make sense?
Yes.
So there's there's vineyard keepers, and they're growing vines of grapes or maybe other fruit trees, fruit vineyards, grape vineyards. Then there's pastures where people keep their flocks or cattle, and that's their business. Ranchers, so to speak, and then you have fields where you sow crops, okay, wheat, barley, whatever else you're growing, vegetables. So what is God saying to do here?
Saying not to, just as, so it's a Sabbath, so on the 7th day we rest, we don't do any work. Saying on the 7th year that not to yield your harvest, let your land rest and just grow, right? And not to pull from the land on that 7th year.
Correct. So, yes. So basically, it's saying that you work hard for 6 years, sowing your field, being an aggressive agricultural business person, trying to get profit out of it. But every 7 years, you're supposed to stop, just rest. You're not supposed to do any work in your fields. You're supposed to have a whole year of rest.
And take extra care of your people that work for you and your animals.
Yeah. So it says, what grows of its own accord of your harvest you shall not reap, nor gather the grapes of your untended vine, for it is year of rest for the land. So not only are you not supposed to sow or prune anything, you're not supposed to do it, but you're not even supposed to go touch what grows naturally. Because if you've been growing wheat, or you got grapes, on vines, there's going to be fruit that grows on its own. Okay, it'll still grow. It's just going to go a little more wild that year. But you're not supposed to go get any of it for the purpose of business.
That actually reminds me of last year I was growing cucumbers, and apparently a small cucumber that had viable seeds in it fell off the vine onto the ground outside the planter. And this year when I planted cucumbers again, the stuff that fell outside started growing on its own right there on George's untilled soil.
Yeah.
And it turned into a huge vine that's bigger than the one that I planted myself.
Well, that's cool. All right. Well, verse 6 says, and the Sabbath produce of the land shall be food for you, your male and female, so your hired man and stranger dwells with you. For your livestock and the beasts that are in your land, all its produce shall be for food. So my understanding of what this is saying is you can eat for personal use what is growing. Okay. If there's vegetables, fruit, stuff you need for your family, your servants to eat, for your livestock, you can do that. But don't go out and work the fields. Don't go sow new crops. Don't go tend the vines, and don't gather a big gleaning or a big harvest. You're gonna have a ton of wheat coming up. Just let it grow and die. You can take what you need for your family, but don't go sell it in the marketplace. Make sense? So, if we applied that today, how would that apply today? I mean, we're not farmers.
I would say maybe, let's say, can I use Boulder Creek as an example?
Sure.
Right. So maybe to apply this to Boulder Creek, if there were ways that you were trying to make Boulder Creek a little bit better, as in to produce more revenue. So maybe adding drinks or expanding the downstairs, or offering additional worship nights, things like that. On that 7th year, you would cease kind of trying to grow the business exponentially, right? And just kind of let the business rest and do what it does. Go from there.
Yeah, it's a rhythm, right? It's basically saying every 7 years you're supposed to have kind of a sabbatical year. I mean, imagine what this would have done in the farm. So what is this going to do in the farmer's life?
Reduce stress.
Reduce stress?
It could, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in theory, although what's he going to eat and have for income that year, right?
It's like building your faith in God.
Yeah, you're having to have faith for a whole year. I mean, it's hard enough for people to rest for one day a week. Imagine telling them you got to rest for a whole year, and not just one family, but the whole nation has to take a break.
And they didn't go out and get second jobs either, because this was a day of no work.
Well, now this is specifically about the land, so in theory, the farmer could go do other kinds of jobs. It doesn't mean he's like sitting around looking at the sun all day. He can go learn a new craft, be a blacksmith.
But there were a lot of babies born.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, this good discussion. Like, is it supposed to be a complete? Yeah, probably. Is it supposed to be a complete sabbatical, like where you do no work, or is this mainly for the land? Well, there's definitely an agricultural purpose behind it. Okay, because if you constantly work land with the same crop, it uses the land up, and eventually it stops producing because it uses right. So there's a, in feudal England, for example, they had a fallow field rule where they had 3 fields that serfs would work, and they would work every year. They'd work 2 fields and they'd leave the 3rd field fallow, and then they'd rotate which one was being left fallow every year. So
Kind of like when you move a herd around certain fields, they
Right.
eat from one, let the other one grow up and switch them out again.
right, because you'll kill it.
Mhm.
Now I'm not an expert on all the reasons why, but part of this letting the fruit part of I think what is happening is the wheat or the vines or whatever it is, or the trees, they're pulling nutrients up from deeper down up into the fruit. The fruit's falling down and then rotting, and so those nutrients are getting to that process, are getting pulled from deep up to high, and then put on the soil. It's creating compost as a like more shallow level of nutrients. I think that's part of it. There's also a thing of just space dust. There's a certain amount of space dust that comes into our atmosphere constantly, and there's nutrients in that. There's all kinds of things from magnesium to zinc, you name it, that is just like constantly filtering down into our atmosphere like a microscopic rain we can't see, and that is re-nourishing our land, as we're using it. So I don't know how much either one of if those are the only things that are impacting it, but we do know that this is a real principle. The Dust Bowl that happened here in the 1930s was a direct result of farmers not letting land rest, and they just kept working the field, and then basically the soil died and became like sand. Okay. So this is a real principle, so it needs to be obeyed. But psychologically, I think, this is just a nice cultural rhythm. It's like, if you're just working your entire life like crazy, you never get a rest. But God's almost mandated, hey, not only are we going to rest one every 7 days, but every 7th year you can take a rest. You can just step back, spend time with your family, think about bigger things.
Have you done that?
Not as well as I would like to, and I think God has kind of been trying to get me to, and I haven't observed this well enough, and we're going to talk about that, what my patterns have been in a little bit. Say what?
Small sense for frozen.
What network are you on? Yeah, you're on the wrong network.
The private one, isn't it? Oh, you just turned it off. Go back get to that one.
I can imagine this creates an extreme amount of discipline, right? Doing this.
I'm gonna try that one. 1 second. We're trying to get the. All right. Anyways, just play with the networks and try to get them back up there. Yeah, this definitely creates it would create a lot of discipline. Now I'm gonna give you guys a. Is it working? All right. Can y'all see us there on Zoom? Joey, wave at us if you can hear us. No, I think we're just frozen for them. Okay. Yep, he's got a thumbs up.
Okay, good.
All right, we're back up. So anyways,
Yeah, you keep breaking up a lot and freezing, but then they'll come back.
well, is it better now?
I can also put them on my hotspot.
And it seems very delayed too.
All right, I'll put
Okay.
them on my hotspot.
Yeah.
I don't mind.
Okay.
I'll do that.
Sorry, guys on Zoom. We're still working on all the. All right, we're gonna try a different network. Okay. Where were we at? We were talking about the discipline. Can you mute? I think we're gonna have right there. Yeah. Okay. All right. Anyways, you've got a rhythm where we're resting every 7 years. Do you think this would have been hard for people to do?
Yes.
And I don't think they ever really did it.
Yeah.
Or at least, maybe they did in the beginning or at times of revival, but in general, this wasn't observed very well in Israel. And we're going to talk more about that in a minute. But let's go ahead and read verses 8 through 12.
You shall count 7 Sabbaths of years for yourself, 7 times 7 years. And the time of the 7 Sabbaths of years shall be to you 49 years. Then you shall cause the trumpet of Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month. And on the day of atonement you shall make the trumpet to sound throughout all your land. And you shall consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout all the land to all of its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you, and each of you shall return to his possession, and each of you shall return to his family. The 50th year shall be a jubilee to you, in it shall be you shall neither sow nor reap, but grows of its own accord. Nor gather the grapes of the unintended vine, for it is the jubilee. It shall be holy to you, and you shall eat its produce from the field.
Okay. Hey, Ethan, it's okay. Don't mess with it. So we have, it says, you shall count 7 Sabbaths of years for yourself. 7 times 7 years.
Yeah.
Okay, that's 49 years, right? So again, 7 Sabbaths. So you have 7 Sabbath cycles, Sabbath year cycles. You get 49, and then what happens? The 50th year is called the year of Jubilee. Who's heard of the year of Jubilee before? Raise your hand. Okay, so the year of Jubilee is the 50th year, and it's a year of returning things to their original state or original owners. This would begin, so technically the year of Jubilee starts on Rosh Hashanah, right? The Feast of Trumpets, the new year. The civil new year. And notice that we talked about how there's a civil new year and a religious new year in the Hebrew calendar. So this is beginning on, the trumpet is being sounded on the 10th day of the 7th month, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. So basically this is starting on the 10th day of the civil year. Okay, so what the year of Jubilee then has to do with is not religious in nature, but civil, meaning legal, meaning financial, those kind of things, business. Make sense? What is happening in this year of Jubilee? Well, you shall consecrate the 50th year, so you make it holy, and in verse 10, and proclaim liberty throughout all the land to its inhabitants, freedom. So God is a God of freedom. He loves freedom for his people. In fact, that's what Jesus said. He said he came to give us life and to give it abundantly, right? And so this is what he's talking about. Liberty for his people by following his law. And we're going to see one way here that God brought us liberty, or brought them liberty. It shall be a jubilee for you, and each of you shall return to his possession, and each of you shall return to his family. That 50th year shall be a jubilee to you. In it you shall neither sow nor reap what grows of its own accord, nor gather the grapes of your untended vine, for it is the jubilee. It shall be holy to you. You shall eat its produce from the field. So this is an echo. In the 50th year, we're supposed to do the same thing that they did in the Sabbath year. Okay, but now the jubilee is coming after how many years? 49. Okay, 49 is 7 times 7. So you have 7 cycles of 7 Sabbath years. So what was the 49th year? What kind of year was the 49th year, right before this year?
It was a Sabbath year.
It was a Sabbath year. So 2 straight years of not sowing your field. Okay, in this context. Or pruning your vineyard, relying on the Lord for provision.
Year of freedom.
Year of freedom. Let's go ahead and I'm gonna read for you 13 through 17 to see what else would happen in this year. It says, in this year of Jubilee, each of you shall return to his possession. What does that mean? Each of you shall return to his possession. And if you sell anything to your neighbor or buy from your neighbor's hand, you shall not oppress one another. According to the number of years after the Jubilee, you shall buy from your neighbor, and according to the number of years of crops, he shall sell to you. According to the multitude of years, you shall increase its price, and according to the fewer number of years, you shall diminish its price. For he sells to you according to the number of the years of the crops. Therefore you shall not oppress one another, but you shall fear your God, for I am the Lord your God. So what does that mean? What in the world is he talking about? What is he talking about with the pricing of things being sold and returning to your possession?
He's talking about land.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about real estate, because we're going to see that when Israel, in the book of Joshua, Israel is given as a lot of land. The tribes, each tribe is given a certain part of the land of Israel, right? And each clan is given part of land. Each family was given some land. And so over the decades, over the centuries, what God did not want is he did not want a bunch of people getting smart about real estate and making a lot of deals. The next thing you know, Issachar is all over Reuben's territory, Manasseh's over here, and Ephraim's down here. It's all just mixed up, and the tribes are no longer distinct. Okay, God is basically setting up a system which says you can sell your land. If you want to sell your land, you can sell your land. But in the year of Jubilee, it's going to come back to you. In other words, you cannot permanently sell land in Israel. You can only essentially lease it. Okay, you can only lease out your land for a certain period of time, but you cannot permanently sell it. So then what is this saying? Well, it's saying in verse 15, according to the number of years after the Jubilee, you shall buy for your neighbor. And according to the number of years of crops, he shall sell to you. So meaning, like, if we just finished the Jubilee, okay, and Sam wants to sell me his field, okay, let's say that we believe that the rental price, that it's a reasonable thing for this land's rent. Like if I was going to rent from Sam for 1 year, he might say, yeah, I'll rent it to you for 1 year for $10,000. And I would say, okay, fine. Well, if we're saying he's going to sell me the land, and we're year 1 after the last Jubilee, there's another 50 years of crops to go before the next Jubilee, and I want to buy the land from him, then he would sell it to me for $500,000.
The rest of the years, right?
But if it is only 25 years until the next Jubilee, we're halfway there, then his land is now only worth $250,000. It's not worth $500K anymore.
You gotta give it back.
Because I'm going to have to give it back to him in 25 years. Okay, if we're 10 years away, then it's only worth $100,000. So the real estate value is going down like this. So you can see, like, economically, this might have produced a lot of land transactions right after the Jubilee, if this is being followed, because people want the maximum price. If I don't want to farm my field, I'm going to sell it year 1 of the Jubilee at the maximum price. But then there'll probably be competition, you know, and it might drive the prices down a little bit. That also would discourage people from selling, because God really in the system doesn't want people selling. And he's not prohibiting it, but he's making it so it's financially less attractive. Now, and we already talked about one of the reasons, but another reason is it's pretty hard to go homeless, okay, in this system.
Yeah, I know, because everybody's gonna have a chance to have land, and
I mean, you can go homeless for, I guess, up to 49 years. But at some point, depending on where you are at the cycle, but at some point, you know you're going to have land come back to you that you could work, that would become your possession again, no matter what had happened before. And that's why the year of Jubilee was a year of freedom, of liberty, because it's the cancellation of debts. Like, all debts were canceled in this year. If you owed somebody money, canceled. Okay, Okay, it's just forgotten. So
Let's see.
It's nice.
yeah, so basically, if you're gonna loan somebody money, you also would be very hesitant to loan the money if you're like 1 year away from Jubilee.
Yeah, 'cause you won't get it back.
Make sense?
Yeah.
So this is the year of Jubilee is a big year of reset. Okay, and this is what God means in verse 14 and 17. He's repeating, if you sell anything to your neighbor or buy from your neighbor, you shall not oppress one another. In verse 17, you shall not oppress one another. So he's saying you're not going to do not insist on a high price. Like if you're in year 2 or 3 after the Jubilee, you don't get to ask for $500,000. You need to lower it to 480, 470,000. Okay, God's saying do not oppress your brother by saying no, this is the price I want. You got to say no, reduce it by the number of years that are missing. Okay, so God is giving a law here saying real estate isn't supposed to be speculation. Okay, isn't supposed to be speculated upon, at least with regards to farmland, because farmland produces food, and it was supposed to be the permanent provision for the people of Israel to avoid poverty. This is a system God's setting up to prevent poverty in the greatest way possible, as much as possible in a human system. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of cool. We're seeing like economics.
Right.
Oh, he knows economics.
Yeah.
Then he knows how to manipulate us. He knows how to motivate us financially, discourage us financially, encourage us financially to do something. And essentially what he's saying is, I want my people provided for. I'm not going to absolutely restrict your economic activity, but I'm going to command a system that will discourage real estate speculation on agricultural land, so that so every family, so no family is permanently landless in the nation of Israel. No matter how many thousands of years go on, no matter how many times a family sells their house, they're going to get their house back after 50 years, if it's in the country. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that meant that when this land was assigned to a clan, or assigned to a family, assigned to the tribe, it's permanently that tribe, it's permanently that family, it's permanently clan for generations after generations. And if you're selling it, it's just temporary. You're like saying, well, I'm going to do a long-term lease, do a long-term maybe, but this is really still our family's property.
They still do that now?
No, they're not obeying it now, but very, very little of what modern Israel does today is following the law of God, just like we're not doing very much of this very well. And yet I think God is still applying those things, okay? So who can read verses 18 through 22?
I got you.
Okay?
Therefore you shall do my statutes and keep my rules and perform them, and then you will dwell in the land securely. The land will yield its fruit, and you will eat your fill and dwell in it securely. And if you say, what shall we eat in the 7th year, if we may not sow or gather our crop? I will command my blessing on you in the 6th year, so that it will produce a crop sufficient for 3 years. When you sow in the 8th year, you will be eating some of the old crop. You shall eat the old until the 9th year, when its crop arrives.
Okay, so when you observe his stat, what is he saying in verse 18 as a kind of promise?
Mm-hmm.
He's saying, when you shall observe my statutes and keep my judgments and perform them, and you will dwell in the land in safety. Meaning, if you keep my statutes, keep these rules I'm giving you, you're going to remain in the land safely. And he doesn't even say healthier or prosperity, financial prosperity. He's simply saying safety, which is a peace from war. Okay. What's interesting is Israel, Judah did not keep this very much, and we know this because, hold on, let's see, we're gonna look up, I think it's Ezra 1. Let me just go there real quick. Or is it Second Chronicles 36:20? 36:21. Let me just go to Second Chronicles. Sorry, I feel unprepared this morning. It's because we had all these interruptions as I was coming in. Okay. All right, so if you go to 2 Chronicles 36, this is discussing the destruction of Jerusalem by Babylon, okay, which happened in 586 BC. It says, therefore, in verse 17, therefore he brought against them the king of the Chaldeans, who killed their young men with the sword in the house of their sanctuary in the temple, and had no compassion on young man or virgin, on the aged or the weak. He gave them all into his hand. This is God gave them all into the hand of the king of the Chaldeans, the king of the Babylonians. And all the articles from the house of God, great and small, the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king and of his leaders, all these he took to Babylon. Then they burned the house of God, broke down the wall of Jerusalem, burned all its palaces with fire, and destroyed all its precious possessions. And those who escaped from the sword he carried away to Babylon, where they became servants to him and his sons, until the rule of the kingdom of Persia, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed her Sabbaths. As long as she lay desolate, she kept Sabbath to fulfill 70 years. In other words, Jeremiah has a prophecy, Daniel echoes the prophecy, said that Judah, after Babylon conquered it, would be in exile for 70 years. Okay? Y'all follow me? So, in exile for 70 years. But why? Well, 36:20, 2 Chronicles 36:21 says, to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah until the land had enjoyed her Sabbaths.
They weren't following.
So they were not following this rule. And so, and God had told them that if they observed his statutes, that they would dwell in the land in safety. Okay, so they didn't, and so he removed them. So 70 years it was allowed to rest, because that which indicates to us that there were 70 Sabbath years not observed, which means for 490 years they did not observe the Sabbath. Okay, which means that God is patient. He's patient for 500 years. And this is why people get lulled into a false sense of peace, like a false sense of security with God's judgment. To see like, well, God hasn't done anything. He hasn't judged for all this time. Well, how long did he wait to judge over not following this? 490 years. He was patient. Okay, but there was an end to it, because what is 490? It's 70 times 7, which is a year of completion. It's like, okay, my patience is complete. The land needs its Sabbaths. We're removing you, etc. Make sense?
It's almost like he's doing what the Jubilee is purposed to do. It's kind of like doing that hard reset on that, on that 500th year, doing that.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
It was a forced reset.
Forced Jubilee.
You could even speculate. I speculate, if we know from the Path to Strength course that disobedience to God empowers the enemy, right? Right?
Yeah.
And so Jerusalem was destroyed in 586 BC. Why? Because, I mean, we know we're talking about this passage, but in the other passages, it's telling us that because of their idol worship, because of child sacrifice and idol worship and all that stuff. Where does the inspiration to worship idols come from and sacrifice children? Do people just get those notions on their own? That's from spiritual warfare. The enemy spirits, the fallen angels, are inspiring that, okay? Which means they were empowered. How were they empowered? Well, if you've been commanded to keep Sabbath years and you're not doing it, you're empowering the enemy. Every Sabbath cycle, the enemy is getting stronger in the land. And this is why idolatry is increasing, part of the reason. Make sense?
Yeah.
And if they had observed the Sabbath year, they would have had a lot more time for study of the Bible and talking and relating, and holiness would have been promoted instead of constant pursuit of money. So the constant pursuit of money causes us to sin, drives us into sin. And God knows that, and He built these cycles in for a reason. Does this all make sense? But now, Ethan, can you read for me again, verses 20 through 22?
You may ask, what will we eat in the 7th year if we do not plant or harvest our crops? I will send you such a blessing in the 6th year that the land will yield enough for 3 years. While you plant during the 8th year, you will eat from the old crop and will continue to eat from it until the harvest of the 9th year comes in.
Mm-hmm.
The land must not be sold permanently.
Well, let's stop right there.
Oh, my fault.
So, what is he saying he's going to do?
Take care of it.
Yeah.
Provide.
Provide.
Provide for that time.
Yep, he says if you're intending, just like he gave the Israelites double manna on the 6th day,
Mhm.
he's saying in the 6th year, I'm going to give you double provision. Okay? And he says, so you're going to have, in the 6th year, I'm going to give you enough to take you through 3 years so that you can eat it in the 6th year, you can eat it in the Sabbath year, and then even eat it in the 8th year while you're sowing for the next. Okay? Until that produce comes in.
Such a generous God.
Makes sense? So and he's also saying he's going to do this for the year of Jubilee. Now, you say, well, what is the relevance of this today? Well, I'll just bear witness here. I think he does this in our lives. He takes our country, and even us personally, through these cycles, and we may not even realize it. Okay? Because I found myself frustrated in recent months, because with my businesses, just confession, I have been struggling a little bit with high cost and things breaking, you name it. There's been financial issues which have caused me concern. Okay, and I'm eating into savings, personal savings that I did not want to eat into. Okay, and so it started to cause me some stress. But all of a sudden, I had an epiphany, and I realized, why am I not understanding? Because I was born in 1973.
I can relate to something
Okay.
too.
I was born in 1973.
I'm 50.
So what year was last year for me?
Your 50th.
50th year.
Mhm.
Okay. So this is my year of Jubilee, so to speak, according to the Hebrew counting. And in 2022, God gave me a big financial boon, which is help funded my kids' colleges, and that's the savings I'm eating into right now. And then I thought back and I realized, well, the last financial boon I had before that was 2015, which was exactly 7 years before. The last financial boon I had before that was 2008.
7 years.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm high for you.
And I had another one in 2001.
That's interesting.
And I had another one in 1990. So I go back and I'm like, oh. And it wasn't like, and they were basically exactly what I needed for the years that were going to come on. But every time I've gone through this cycle, I haven't, until this one, I'm finally realizing, oh,
Yeah.
I should have been relaxing and not stressed and understood that I'm supposed to be just observing this and resting for these years and trusting in this provision He's given me. And in 2015, I definitely didn't do that. I took all the extra provision and I tried to plant something in that year, which this is saying don't do that. And I lost it all. And I really struggled for the next couple of years. Okay, so I don't know, but I think maybe He does this with us still, whether we know it or not. And I also noticed with our country, for example, there are financial setbacks every 7 years. Okay. And 2008, 2015, I think we had a minor one. 2001, we had September 11th. They always happen in the fall, of that year. And again, I talk about 1973, but what happens in the year of Jubilee? We said debts are all canceled, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Things are reset. Well, justice is also done, and debts are not just canceled, their payment is due, okay? So abortion began in this country in 1973, nationally. Joe Biden entered politics in 1973. So 2023 was the year of Jubilee for all of that. And so now what I'm wondering and thinking is judgment now due this year for all of these warlings? It's time to pay the debt. That's what I'm wondering. But I do see the same pattern, with the 7 years. You go all the way back to like 1987, we had a huge financial crisis as well. So you see the same 7 years where it's like we're not observing the Sabbath year principles, we're not observing these economic principles, and God seems to be forcing a reset. Make sense? So I think that we should study these things and not ignore them, because he has a heart, he has principles behind them, he has purposes behind them, and these cycles are actually opportunities to have rest and faith, to have faith and rest, and not strive. Okay, let's go ahead and read 23 through 28.
I can read.
Go ahead, Al.
The land shall not be sold permanently, for the land is mine. For you are strangers and sojourners with me, and in all the land of your possession you shall grant redemption of the land. If one of your brethren becomes poor and has sold some of his possessions, and if his redeeming relative comes to redeem it, then he may redeem what his brother sold. Or if the man has no one to redeem it, but he himself becomes able to redeem it, then let him count the years since its sale, and restore the remainder to the man to whom he sold it, and that he may return to his possession. But if he is not able to have it restored to himself, then what was sold shall remain in the hand of him who bought it until the year of Jubilee. And in the Jubilee it shall be released, and he shall return to his possession.
Okay. So the land shall not be sold permanently, for the land is mine. He's saying, and this was, if you guys know the feudal system in the Middle Ages, that this is a very similar concept. Basically, in England, for example, the land was known, it was considered the king's property. It was the king's property, and he leased it or entitled it to nobility, different nobles, barons, earls, etc. But in return, they had to pay him a percent of the crops as taxes.
Are you gonna bring up Braveheart?
No.
Okay.
I wish I could find a way to bring Braveheart into it, but I can't do that.
That's right.
Maybe we will later. So, and then a knight would be under the baron or under the earl, and a knight would have lesser holdings, and he had to give a portion of that to the baron or the earl, and they had to give it to the king. And serfs, and freemen had their own role, but all of it was the king's. Well, God is saying the same thing here. The land is mine, he says. I am the king. Okay. You are strangers and sojourners with me. Meaning this earth isn't yours. Even though I own it, this is not your home. Heaven is our home. And in all the land of your possession, you shall grant redemption of the land. So whatever land you're possessing, and this would then apply to future lands of the tribes of Israel, wherever they would go. Y'all see that? If one of your brethren becomes poor, So what I'm saying is, if there's a country that wasn't in the land of Israel, but they went up into Central Europe or Asia or someplace like that, then the system would apply there too, is what he's saying. In verse 25, if one of your brethren becomes poor and has sold some of his possession, and if his redeeming relative comes to redeem it, then he may redeem what his brother sold. So if Sam and I are brothers, sorry I keep picking on you, Sam, but we're brothers. Sam's poor, he sells his car or he sells a field is really what this is really applying to. Okay, he sells one of his fields. The person who bought the field from Sam, if I as his brother or his uncle or a close family member want to redeem it back to the family, then whoever Sam sold it to has to sell it to. It's not like an optional sale. Yes, Ethan.
So if we're going over in 2024, we're going over Leviticus right now. I might be overthinking it. You use the word, it's applying to a field, but the way that we should be studying this is like it's referring to a field at that time. How do we apply it to 2024 living is what I'm asking.
That's a very good question. Let's finish understanding all the rules around it, and then
I didn't mean to twist it, but I just
let's see if there's any. First, we want to understand all the rules. Then we want to understand God's heart behind that, what that means,
okay.
And then we're going to see if there's modern application. Okay. So, but the bottom line is, it's saying like if Sam becomes poor and he's forced to sell his house or his field or something like that, and he sells it to some stranger because that's the guy with money, then at any point I can come as his brother or uncle or whoever and buy it back, and the stranger he sold it to has no choice but to sell it back. The reason is because God's priority is preservation of the original family's land. Make sense? Okay. And notice the word redeem. This is important. What is redemption?
To be brought back or come out of something and brought back into goodness.
Correct. So it is to pay the price to free something.
Like what Jesus did for us.
Correct. And I think ultimately that is the main modern application is
So today.
we became poor and sold ourselves to the devil.
Yeah.
And Jesus, our brother, came and redeemed us. He paid the blood to redeem us away from the enemy. Okay, verse 26. Or if the man has no one to redeem it, but he himself becomes able to redeem it, then let him count the years since its sale and restore the remainder to the man who has sold it, that he may return his possession. So in this case, Sam becomes poor. Year one after the Jubilee, he sells his field for $500,000. Okay, and then 3 years later, he wants it back. The stranger cannot say, nope, not selling it. Okay. The stranger if Sam says, I have the money now, I want to buy it back. Okay. Then the stranger has to sell it back to Sam. But the price now in year 3 would be $470,000, not $500,000. Right. Okay. And the man had use of it for 3 years. So notice there's no interest accumulating on a loan, so to speak. It's actually every year that goes by it becomes easier for Sam to buy his land back.
Did they have depreciating and appreciating assets back then? Like, was there stuff that like?
No, they did not, because there was no Federal Reserve to print money.
Well, like, yeah, but like, was there things that were like, oh, back in that time, it's like, yeah, this is becoming more scarce and scarce. Like, would you think there were things like that?
So, okay, there's two things that affect the price of things. There's supply and demand, and then there's inflation. Okay, so sure, you have the, if you have, and you see in supply and demand affecting things in Scripture. There was a point in Solomon's kingdom where gold and silver became so prevalent that they started treating it like it was nothing valuable. Okay. So when you have oversupply of something, people don't want it. But in, you also have a time where when King Saul was first made king, and Jonathan and they were gathering Israel to fight the Philistines, it says only Saul and Jonathan had swords, right? None of the other Israelites had swords. So I would imagine a sword to an Israelite in that moment was pretty pricey.
Yeah.
Okay, they would have to pay a lot of money. So supply and demand definitely has an impact. But when you're talking about just normal appreciation of property values, that happens in this country and other countries because our banking system is printing money and stealing money from your savings account. And you think you don't understand what they're doing, but that is what they're doing. And you think you're actually gaining value because your house went up in value, but you're not noticing that your salary didn't go up.
Eggs cost more.
Okay, and so actually they've stolen money from you, but in a very tricky way where you think that you came out better because your house is worth more.
Okay, let me pivot real quick.
Yeah.
The land, Sandy went out and,
I just blew Sam's mind today.
Sandy went out and was like,
Go home now.
some prodigal
That's
son moment.
crazy.
Some prodigal son moment, left the field, sold the field. Let's say that field, we don't have assets or we don't have like the Federal Reserve System, but let's say that field all of a sudden starts like just booming, like something that soil and that specific plot compared to every other
Yeah.
field around is like producing more crop, like per yield, like than
Well,
any
sure.
other field. Would that,
I think that would have affected the price. Sure, you would say this, I mean, if you're selling your property, you would say, if you're honest, you say, hey, this is what my field produces in a year typically. And the price would probably be based on that. I mean, if you have a swamp that isn't producing, you're not gonna be able to charge the same amount that you would for a good field.
but even with the Jubilee, like it would, like let's say for that, like an outlier, if that field was just producing, like, would it be, you still get to buy it back cheaper than what you?
Well, I would think so. I mean, I think normal economics, if you have a field that produces a moderate amount of crops, you're saying the rent, it's reasonable to have to pay 10 grand a year for the right to use this. Maybe because this field produces 30 or 40,000 a year, then sure, pay 10,000, you got a profit, okay? But if you have a field that's producing, that produces 3 times that, then the lease rent, so to speak, would be 30,000 a year, and you're producing 90 to 100,000. Makes sense? So yeah, I would think the initial price would be higher, but it's still decreasing.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Sorry, it's not right.
Yeah. Each year. So
You alright, Sandy?
No.
Okay.
you mad about inflation?
Yeah. Oh, I like America.
We've been stealing money from every citizen of the world through the Federal Reserve System, yes. Anyways, and that's ultimately a supply and demand thing because that's what we talk about. When you print dollars, you're increasing the supply of dollars. So the people think, oh, I've got more dollars, but the same dollars are chasing the same product. And so the prices of those things go up. It's just automatic, okay? All right, where were we? 28, but if he is not able to have it restored himself, then what was sold shall remain in the hand of him who bought it until the year of Jubilee, and in Jubilee it shall be released, and it shall return to possession. So one way or the other, it's coming back to the family. They have the right to buy it back early, or they can just wait for Jubilee.
What if they sold the land like to someone outside of this, like outside of the, like if I came
Outside of
I
Israel,
don't think,
we're gonna talk about that. God covers that, all
Mhm.
right? So, verse 29, if a man sells a house in a walled city, then he may redeem it within a whole year after it's sold. Within a full year, he may redeem it. But if it is not redeemed within the space of a full year, then the house in the walled city shall belong permanently to him who bought it throughout his generations. It shall not be released in the Jubilee. So the Jubilee applies to agricultural land, not to city properties in a walled city. Okay, so you can do real estate speculation in a city in God's system, but he doesn't want the food producing land controlled by a small number of large corporations, like exist in the United States, okay?
Nebraska.
He wants this corporation, he wants farming corporations constantly broken up and returned to small families.
Equal distribution.
Equal distribution of food. He doesn't want people denied food. Okay. It said, fine, you want to speculate real estate in the city? That's okay. Even then, if you sell your house to somebody in a city, the seller has the right within 1 year to come back and say, I changed my mind, I want it back.
That is kind of a crazy shout though. Like, like imagine like you like painted the walls,
Yeah.
like you did some like
Sure.
DIY stuff.
So I imagine if you bought a house in a city, you're not gonna paint walls in the first year. You're gonna live in it like you're renting. You know.
Because you don't know.
After the year, it's yours, so you can do whatever you want. But again, so he's giving people an option. If you get poor and you have to sell it, you can get it back, but limited time because it's not as important.
Was this written? Was this written out like almost like a
Yes.
contract?
You're seeing it right here. It was written. It was given to Moses in writing.
No. I'm saying like between the homeowner, like if I was.
They don't have to. It's in the law.
It's in the law.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah.
Man, people used to be cool.
So, okay, but if it is, let's see, we read that. However, the houses of villages which have no wall around them shall be counted as the fields of the country. They may be redeemed and they shall be released in Jubilee. So, walled cities are being viewed differently from villages that don't have walls. So, you're basically talking about towns versus cities. Okay. So, in these days, Lawrenceville here has enough people, it would have been a walled city. Okay. Decula or Auburn out there would be like more of a country village, which is smaller. Okay. And again, the principle is he wants agricultural land returned, but he's not so worried about the city. Right now, verse 32, nevertheless, the cities of the Levites and the houses in the cities of their possession, the Levites may redeem at any time. So why is he saying this? Well, because the Levites were not given land. They were not given agricultural land. Okay, the Levites were the priestly tribe. They were not supposed to be distracted with agriculture, okay, with farming. The Levites, there's 13 tribes, right? There's originally 12, but then Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, were raised up to full tribe level. That means that there was technically 13 children now, 13 tribes. But 12 tribes were going to be given land in Israel, so the Levites were not given agricultural land. Why? Because the Levites were supposed to be caring for the temple, caring for the tabernacle, teaching people the law of God. They were supposed to be the teachers, the educators, teaching people God's law, how to read, how to write, all these things. They were also the business people. So he didn't want Levites distracted with farming. He wanted them to focus on these things. So their inheritance was cities. There was 6 cities, I believe, in later in the Torah we see. 6 cities were given to the Levites as their possession. And those are your cities. And they were given land right around the city, these walled cities, to farm their vegetables and things. So they weren't to farm huge acreages of wheat. They just were given a certain amount of tillable land to get tomatoes and lettuce and whatever they would need for their personal use. Yeah, for their own food. Right, zucchini, yes, we can go on and name a bunch. So, but because the Levites, the cities were their inheritance and they were the business people, and the scholars and the teachers, the houses were their permanent family possession. It wasn't for them, that was their agriculture. So their houses could always be returned to them. So that would also mean that the home of a Levite would probably always have a lower price than the house of a non-Levite in a walled city. Okay, because the Levite's house, is going to be returned at some point. This would also discourage Levites from speculating in real estate, in business. So God, in general, and they're the ones that have the time to do business. So in general, God is generally discouraging real estate speculation at all. And verse 33, and if a man purchase a house for the Levites, then the house that was sold in the city of his possession shall be released in the Jubilee. For the house and the cities of the Levites are their possession among the children of Israel. But the field of the common land of their cities may not be sold, for it is their perpetual possession. So the common land where they grow their vegetables and stuff outside their walled cities, the Levites couldn't even sell that at all. They couldn't. That wasn't for any kind of poverty relief or debt payments. That was just supposed to be for personal food at all times. So you see, God is basically providing for people to avoid poverty. He's saying, sure, you can do business. You can try to get ahead, but we're going to have a system where it is impossible to become so poor you don't have food. Make sense? And your family is always going to be restored. Like if your whole family goes through bad economic misfortune, there's going to be a reset to give your family a new start. Okay, who can read verses 35 to 38? And this will be the last passage for today. Go ahead.
All right. If one of your brethren becomes poor and falls into poverty among you, then you shall help him like a stranger or a sojourner, then that he may live with you. Take no usury or interest from him, but fear your God, that your brother may live with you. You shall not lend him your money for usury, nor lend him usury. Nor lend him your food at a profit. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan and to be your God.
Okay, so again, God is taking care of the poor. And how is he doing it? He says, if someone falls into poverty, help them like you would a foreigner or a traveler. So better word would be foreigner or a traveler to help you understand. So a foreigner would be a immigrant. A traveler would be an immigrant passing through.
Hot word right now.
Huh?
Hot word right now.
Yeah. So that he may, you're supposed to help him. Well, God says, yes. Well, there's, yeah, the majority of immigrants coming across our border right now are actually seen to be invaders, soldiers, not actual immigrants looking for a better life. So we have a different category of strangers coming into the land right now that we discussed in the Revelation class. But these terms, stranger means foreigner, sojourner means traveler. Okay, but God, in normally, God says there's three groups of people that He cares about. He says, don't mistreat the orphans, the widows, or the foreigners. Okay, so because those are people who are easily oppressed, okay, in a land, right? But in this case, he's saying if someone becomes poor, treat them like you would a foreigner. Okay, so it means help them. Take no usury, which is high interest rates. Take no usury or interest from him, but fear your God that your brother may live with you. So what does help him mean then? If verse 36 says, take no usury or interest from him, then what does it mean to help them?
It means to come to them and support them.
In what way?
Give, but no expectations back.
Give what?
Financially, money.
Food.
Yes, let's just say the word money. It's to give them money.
Money.
To help them means give them money. If someone falls in poverty, give them money. Okay?
Help me.
And it can be a loan, but he's saying no interest, no usury. You don't ask for profit on this. They're in poverty. You just give to them to help them, and they pay it back when they can. Okay? You shall not lend him your money for usury, not for high interest, nor lend him your food at a profit. Don't lend him food, just give him food. Okay? But, so what do you think God thinks about title loan companies?
Let's say HC double hockey stick.
Right.
He doesn't like them.
So Title Max, these title loan companies, it's a sinful business. Okay? In God's eyes, pawn shops. Okay? Sinful business. Sorry, it's just, now, if you have a pawn shop that says, we're willing to buy your thing but you have to prove income. Like if you're under a certain income, we're not buying it, or we're gonna just give you money and not ask for it back, and you can come get your object back too, or at least no interest on it. That would be okay. But pawn shops and title loan companies and paycheck lending companies and this kind of stuff, these are companies, and even credit card companies, who charge a super high interest rate to poor people because they're worried about risk. All of that is a sin. I don't care if you're Bank of America or Title Max or just your local pawn shop dealer. God says, do not charge interest to poor people who are trying to get money because they need it. You know, you want to charge high interest? Okay, charge it to someone rich. Focus lending to the rich. But God doesn't want people like looking at the poor
Take advantage of it.
as a business, like lending to the poor as a business. No, because you're making their poverty worse. Okay, and God says, why are you getting rich off of making somebody poorer? Okay, why are you earning your income off of somebody's hardship? It's not an honorable way to live, to earn an income. God is completely against it. He's not just partially against it. Okay, it's a sinful business. They should be illegal. I watched it happen with the lady, one of the ushers at my at 12th Stone, my church. She was 70 years old, got in financial trouble, you know, had a car that was probably like $3,000 or $4,000 in value. She, you know, got a title loan from one of these title loan companies. I don't remember which company it was, over there in Buford. They gave her $800. $800. Locked her title up. You know, and if she doesn't pay, what do? They take the car. They're gonna come take the car, right? You know how much her interest, you know how much her payment was every month? $200 a month on $800. It was what she's supposed to pay. You think, well, she's gonna pay it off in 4 months, right? No, the interest was $200 a month. So her payment was interest only at $200 a month. So she's paying $200 a month
Was that 20?
just to not lose her car for an $800 loan.
And then she's gonna have to refigure out what.
She was paying this for I don't know how long, and couldn't get out of
Well, that's what they do.
it. Okay, so this is sin. Okay, and this is definitely a modern application. These companies are a sin. Credit cards, you know, honestly, if you're with high interest, you know, interest for poor people on credit cards, sin. And you say, well, what incentive do the credit card companies have? They wouldn't issue credit cards to poor people. Great. It's not doing them any good.
No.
I mean, all you're doing is giving them a loan up front, and then they're like locked in and they're just paying interest to keep this going. Okay, yeah, let's get rid of a lot of credit card companies. Let's make that only available to rich people. Okay, you know, or wealthy people.
Well, they need to get rid of most student loans.
Yeah, same thing. So, yeah, if you got rid of student loans, you know how much the price of college would drop?
I don't know exactly, but I know student loans are a lot.
Well, if you got rid of student loans, price of college would probably drop by half within a year or two.
Mom had a question.
Yes, Sandra.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I was talking to a lady, I did not realize this was going on with Uber. Uber drivers have the option, if they don't have a vehicle, they will get them a vehicle. She was actually having to pay $450 a week to drive for them. So she was paying for that car and not able to have any money.
Driving for free.
Crazy. I had no idea that was going on.
$450 a week to pay for your car.
So you could drive for
You know that. So you can
drive
drive for Uber. You're basic. And what are you supposed to eat with? I mean, that's
Exactly.
basically what you're gonna earn. There's no way that car is costing Uber anywhere close to that.
Nope.
You know, if you had a super expensive car, it'd be $450 a month. And so they're charging them 3 times that amount, 4 times that amount. Yeah, and it's just, and the car's depreciating, going down.
Yeah. And it's not their car.
Nope.
It's like they're just leasing it.
Mm.
They're not buying it.
That's $23,000 a year.
So, yeah, financial literacy is not a very strong quality in our society. Most people are ignorant. Most people are ignorant of the way to manage finances. Our schools don't teach it. That's almost intentional. You know, don't teach kids about managing finances, then you can victimize them. Okay. The banking system, the government, you name it, you know, it's in their interest to keep people stupid. So here at Path to Hope, we're trying to help with that. But regardless, the law, this is God's law. He says, do not lend to the poor people and charge them interest. In fact, you can see his heart is, he doesn't say it's even an option to lend to them. He isn't saying clearly you have to give them money. He's saying you can lend it to them, but you can't charge interest, but you have to lend to them. He's saying you don't have an option. He says you shall help them. So you shall lend to them. And you're not going to charge interest. And so then behind all this, kind of the idea is, well, and what if they can't pay you back? Well, you're kind of understanding that when you lend. Okay. So if you got a poor person who says, hey, I can't eat, well, you're not obligated to lend them $100,000. But you might say, well, okay, I'm going to give you $200. I'm going to help you get food. And you're not looking at it really as a loan, in my opinion. Okay, I think that's what God would say. So you see that God cares for poor people. He set up a system to keep people, prevent poverty as much as possible. He's saying very clearly not to make poor people a business. And that all of these companies like Title Loan, Title Max, etc., and high interest credit cards, what Uber's doing with these vehicles, all of that should be illegal. Okay. And why? God says, why? 38, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to give you the land of Canaan and to be your God. He's saying, I am the Lord, which means I command you. I'm the one who gives you command. I'm the one who brought you out of slavery in Egypt. I brought you out of slavery. I didn't bring you out of slavery for you to go back into slavery. Okay. I brought you out of slavery to give you the land of Canaan so you would have an inheritance. So we're going to protect the land that I'm giving you, protect your inheritance, and make sure that bad financial decisions aren't putting you back in slavery. We didn't do the 10 plagues. We didn't go through the Red Sea. We didn't go through all this trouble with Sinai and the manna and everything just for you to lose it all, your opportunity for what I'm doing because you had a gambling debt. Okay? Or because you had a bad crop one year, or because you did something else stupid. Okay, we're going to set up a system where it is impossible for you, any family in Israel, to permanently lose their inheritance. Because I am your God, he says, and so you will do what I say. And that's the reason. Okay? Any questions?
Well, I just think it's so cool to see God putting together an economy like this, because we live in a world right now where it's very opposite of some of these principles, right? You have people trying to prey on the poor people with high interest rates. You have a lot of people unknowingly, buying depreciating assets, selling generational assets like homes and stuff like that because they're in a jam. They're enslaved to some debt, and they're essentially selling over all these things that right. And God he knows that, and he understands how these things work far better than we do. He's actually implementing these concepts to protect us from this kind of like state that we're in right now, especially in our country. It's just kind of cool to see that he's put, like, this is like God's perfect economy that we're talking about right now. So it's kind of cool to see that he's even protecting his people, he's protecting us with financial literacy right here in the Bible. And it's just like an economics class this morning, so that was fun.
Yeah, he is an amazing God. He cares about the poor. He cares about the poor more than he cares about people getting rich. Okay, so is God in favor of a free market? No.
No.
Unbridled capitalism? No. Is he in favor of socialism? Absolutely not. Socialism is death. Okay. Is he in favor of generally of a free market? Yes. Okay. But God puts certain limitations on a free marketplace in order to protect poor people from being victimized, right? He doesn't say anything goes in the marketplace. He says you're free to do business, you're free to try to build wealth. You know, he blessed Abraham and Isaac and Jacob all with amazing levels of wealth. But so he's not against that. But he's against it if you're doing it by taking advantage of poor people or of certain people in your society are losing permanently their place in the land, so to speak. Make sense? All right, well, let's go ahead and pray, and we'll close out here. Stacy, would you close us?
Yes. Heavenly and gracious God, our Father, Lord Jesus, we just thank you so much for being able to study and understand Old Testament law, which does apply still, today, and how we are supposed to follow it and understand it. Father, I just ask that you just give us a heart to where we don't become people who take advantage of other people. Give us a heart that we can take care of those around us that are in need, but most importantly, spreading the gospel and spreading the love of Jesus. Because this world is broken, and there's a lot of people that just need love. They need the love of Jesus. Father God, I just pray for each and every one of us that have been here this morning, and those that are not with us, you just meet them where they are. Father, protect us this week as we go about and do kingdom work and do business. Protect the businesses, that Brian is trying to manage. The enemy tries to creep in and destroy, but you are such a gracious God and a just God. And I just ask that your will be done. And we love you and we praise Jesus for these things, and we believe and we receive. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.
All right, we'll see y'all next week.
So today is contact day.
Let's go.
Bye.
Introductory set, baby.